Marcus wiped the sweat from his brow as he pushed the heavy cleaning cart down the gleaming corridors of Zenith Station, the largest orbital hub in the Andromeda Trade Confederation. The massive space station housed representatives from hundreds of alien species, each more technologically advanced than humanity. Humans were among the newest members of the galactic community, barely 50 years since first contact, and they occupied the lowest rungs of interstellar society. Most humans worked as laborers, cleaners, or in other service positions that the advanced alien races considered beneath them. Marcus had been scrubbing floors and emptying waste bins for 3 years now, saving every credit to eventually afford passage back to Earth to see his sick mother. The pay was terrible, but it was honest work, and Marcus took pride in keeping the station clean. As he rounded the corner near the diplomatic quarter, Marcus heard a commotion ahead. Several Kithran guards, tall reptilian beings with crystalline armor, were surrounding something near the waste disposal area. Their translator devices crackled as they spoke in harsh, dismissive tones. "Disgusting creature," one guard spat. "How did this thing even get aboard the station?" "Probably stowed away in a cargo hold," another replied. "Look at it, covered in filth and barely able to stand. We should just space it and be done with it." Marcus pushed his cart closer, curiosity overcoming his usual caution around the station's security forces. Between the legs of the towering guards, he caught sight of what they were harassing. His breath caught in his throat. It was a dragon, but unlike anything he had ever seen in Earth's legends and stories. This creature was ancient, her scales dulled to a mottled gray-green, and she was clearly female based on the more delicate bone structure around her skull. She was roughly the size of a large horse, though her serpentine body was coiled defensively. Her clothes were little more than tattered rags, and she clutched a small bundle of possessions to her chest with clawed hands that shook from either fear or age. What struck Marcus most was her eyes. Despite her obvious poverty and the guards' harassment, her golden eyes held a dignity and intelligence that seemed to pierce right through him. There was something regal about the way she held herself, even in such dire circumstances. "Please," the Dragoness spoke, her voice melodious despite her apparent weakness. "I have proper documentation. I'm seeking passage to the Outer Rim territories." "Documentation?" The lead guard laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "These forgeries wouldn't fool a hatchling. You're coming with us for processing and deportation." As the guards moved to grab the elderly Dragoness, something inside Marcus snapped. He had grown up poor on Earth, had seen how the wealthy and powerful treated those they considered beneath them. The same dynamics existed here among the stars, and he couldn't stand to watch it happen again. "Excuse me, officers," Marcus called out, stepping forward despite his racing heart. The Kithran guards turned to look at him, their expressions shifting from annoyance to barely concealed contempt. To them, Marcus was just another lowly human janitor, beneath their notice most days. "What do you want, human?" the lead guard demanded. "This doesn't concern you." "Actually, it does," Marcus said, his voice steadier than he felt. "This lady is with me. She's helping me with some specialized cleaning in the diplomatic quarters. Dragon fire is excellent for sterilizing certain types of contamination." It was a complete lie, but Marcus delivered it with such conviction that the guards hesitated. The diplomatic quarters were off-limits to most security personnel without proper authorization, and cleaning protocols that were deliberately complex to prevent espionage. The Dragoness looked at Marcus with surprise, but said nothing. She seemed to understand that he was trying to help her, though she couldn't fathom why a stranger would risk himself for her sake. "The human speaks truth," she said softly, following Marcus's lead. "I've been hired for my expertise in thermal cleansing." The lead guard's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "I've never heard of such a thing." "Really?" Marcus replied, feigning surprise. "I thought Kithran guards would be familiar with all station cleaning protocols. Perhaps I should report to your supervisor that there might be a gap in your training." The threat was subtle but effective. The guards prided themselves on their knowledge of station operations, and admitting ignorance could result in disciplinary action. More importantly, They didn't want to risk interfering with diplomatic quarter operations without being absolutely certain of their ground. Fine, the lead guard snarled. But if we find out you're lying, human, you'll be cleaning waste recyclers in the lower level for the rest of your contract. As the guards moved away, grumbling among themselves, Marcus let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. He turned to the Dragoness, who was studying him with those penetrating golden eyes. "Thank you, young one," she said formally. "I'm called Seraphina. I am in your debt." "Marcus," he replied, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "And you don't owe me anything. I just couldn't stand watching them treat you like that." Seraphina looked at his outstretched hand with curiosity, then gently touched it with one clawed finger. The contact sent a strange, tingling sensation up Marcus's arm, though he attributed it to nerves from the confrontation. "You have shown kindness to a stranger at risk to yourself," she said. "Among my people, this creates a bond of honor that cannot be easily dismissed." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Seraphina said firmly. "What you did was remarkable. Most beings in the station would have walked past without a second glance. Some would have joined in the harassment for sport." She was right, and Marcus knew it. The station operated on strict hierarchies based on technological advancement and galactic influence. Humans were near the bottom, but there were species even lower, and they were often treated cruelly by those with more power. "Where are you trying to go?" Marcus asked. "The Outer Rim territories are pretty rough." Seraphina's expression grew distant. "I seek my family. We were separated during a conflict many years ago. I have reason to believe some of my kin may have settled in the frontier worlds." There was pain in her voice, old grief that time had dulled, but not erased. Marcus felt a surge of sympathy for this dignified creature who had clearly endured great loss. "Well, you can't travel looking like this," he said practically. "The guard will just harass you again at the next checkpoint. Why don't you come with me? I got a small quarters in the service sections. You can clean up and rest while we figure out how to get you proper passage." Seraphina stared at him in amazement. "You would open your home to me? A creature you met mere moments ago." "You're not a creature," Marcus said firmly. "You're a person who needs help. Besides, my quarters aren't much, but they're better than sleeping in the corridors." As they walked through the service sections of the station, Marcus pushing his cleaning cart while Seraphina walked beside him, he couldn't help but notice how other beings reacted to her presence. Some showed open disgust, others fear, but most simply ignored her as if she didn't exist. It reminded him painfully of how humans had been treated in their early years in the galactic community. Marcus's quarters were indeed small, barely large enough for a sleeping alcove, a tiny food preparation area, and a sanitation unit. But they were clean and private, which was more than many service workers could afford. "It's not much," Marcus said apologetically as he opened the door. Seraphina stepped inside and looked around with what seemed like wonder. "It is a palace compared to where I have been sleeping," she said softly. "You have given me a great gift, Marcus of humanity." As she cleaned herself in the sanitation unit, Marcus prepared what food he had. His rations were basic, designed to meet human nutritional needs rather than taste preferences, but he did his best to make them presentable. He wasn't sure what dragons ate, but he figured she would tell him if something disagreed with her. When Seraphina emerged from cleaning, Marcus was struck by the transformation. Beneath the grime and exhaustion, her scales had a subtle iridescence that caught the light beautifully. Her bearing was more regal, and there was something about her presence that seemed to fill the small space with quiet dignity. "You look much better," Marcus said, offering her a plate of synthesized protein and vegetables. "I feel much better," she replied, accepting the food gratefully. "It has been some time since I experienced such kindness." As they ate together in comfortable silence, Marcus found himself studying his guest more closely. There were small details about her that seemed oddly refined for someone who appeared to be destitute. The way she held herself, the precise manner in which she spoke, even the way she ate seemed to suggest a background of education and privilege. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said finally. Of course. You don't talk like someone who's been living rough. I mean, your grammar is perfect, your vocabulary is extensive. You seem educated. Serafina paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. For a moment, something flickered across her expression, a weariness that hadn't been there before. I was not always as you see me now, she said carefully. Time and circumstance have a way of changing one's situation. It was clear she didn't want to discuss her past in detail, and Marcus respected that. Everyone had secrets, especially those who had fallen on hard times. He of all people understood that sometimes the past was too painful to share with strangers. Fair enough, he said. We all have our stories. After dinner, Marcus insisted that Serafina take his sleeping alcove while he made do with a makeshift bed on the floor. Despite her protests, he was firm about this. His mother had raised him to be a gentleman, and that meant ensuring a lady's comfort before his own. As he lay in the darkness, listening to Serafina's steady breathing, Marcus wondered what he had gotten himself into. Harboring an undocumented alien could cost him his job, his residence permit, even his freedom if the station authorities decided to make an example of him. But, somehow, he couldn't bring himself to regret his decision. There was something about Serafina that called to him a nobility and grace that seemed almost otherworldly. He had the strange feeling that helping her would change his life in ways he couldn't yet imagine. As sleep finally claimed him, Marcus had no idea just how prophetic that feeling would prove to be. Marcus woke to the most incredible smell he had ever experienced. It was like nothing in his memory, a complex blend of spices and aromas that seemed to dance through the air and make his mouth water instantly. For a moment, he forgot where he was, lost in the sensory experience. Then, he remembered. Serafina. He sat up quickly, his makeshift bedding rustling as he looked toward the food preparation area. The elderly Dragoness was there, working with materials that definitely hadn't been in his quarters the night before. Somehow, she had transformed his basic rations into what looked like a feast fit for royalty. "Good morning, Marcus," she said without turning around. "I hope you don't mind that I took the liberty of preparing breakfast. I thought it was the least I could do after your hospitality. Where did you get all this?" Marcus asked, incredulous. His tiny food storage had contained nothing but standard protein bars and synthesized vegetables. Serafina smiled, an expression that transformed her entire face. "I made do with what you had, plus a few additions from my personal supplies. I have learned to travel with certain essentials." Marcus looked more closely at the small bundle of possessions she had been clutching the night before. It was larger than he had initially thought, and seemed to contain more than should have been physically possible given its size. The fabric itself looked unusual, with patterns that seemed to shift subtly in the light. "That's some bag," he commented. "It has been with me for a very long time," Serafina replied, serving him a plate of food that looked like something from the finest restaurants in the diplomatic quarter. A family heirloom, you might say. The food tasted even better than it smelled. Marcus had grown up eating simple fare, and his years on the station had been filled with bland rations designed for efficiency rather than pleasure. This was like discovering that color existed after a lifetime of seeing only in shades of gray. "This is incredible," he said between bites. "You're wasted as a traveler. You should be running a restaurant in the luxury sector." Something flickered across Serafina's expression at his words, gone too quickly for Marcus to identify. "Cooking is a skill I learned out of necessity," she said. "One learns to make the best of available resources when circumstances demand it." As they ate, Marcus found himself studying his guest again. In the morning light, there were more details that seemed inconsistent with her apparent poverty. Her claws, while dulled by age, had an underlying strength that suggested they had once been formidable. The way she moved spoke of a lifetime of physical confidence, possibly even martial training. Most intriguingly, there were faint marks on her scales in certain places, almost like scars, but too regular and precise. They reminded Marcus of something he had seen in documentaries about various alien cultures, but he couldn't quite place the reference. "Serafina," he said carefully, "can I ask about those markings on your arms?" She glanced down at the faint patterns on her scales, and for a moment her entire demeanor changed. The humble, grateful refugee was replaced by something that looked almost imperial. Then the moment passed, and she was herself again. "Old wounds," she said simply, "from the conflict I mentioned. Sometimes the past leaves visible reminders." Marcus nodded, though something about her answer felt incomplete. He was beginning to suspect that there was much more to Serafina's story than she was willing to share. After breakfast, Marcus had to report for his cleaning duties. Serafina insisted on accompanying him, claiming it would help maintain the cover story he had told the guards. Marcus was worried about the risk, but he had to admit her presence might actually make the deception more believable. As they made their way through the station's corridors, Marcus began to notice something strange. Other aliens, particularly the more advanced species, reacted to Serafina in ways that seemed disproportionate to her apparent status. Some showed what looked like recognition, quickly followed by confusion. Others seemed almost fearful, though they clearly couldn't place why. It was when they passed a group of high-ranking Zolonian diplomats that things became really interesting. The Zolonians were among the most ancient and respected species in the galactic community, known for their vast historical knowledge and careful observation of protocol. As Serafina walked past them, one of the elder diplomats stopped mid-conversation and stared at her with something that looked like shock. The Zolonian whispered something to his companions in their native language, too quickly for the universal translators to process clearly. Marcus caught fragments, "impossible long thought dead," and what sounded like a name or title he didn't recognize. Serafina seemed to sense their attention and glanced in their direction. For just a moment, her golden eyes met those of the elder Zolonian, and Marcus saw the alien's expression shift from shock to something that looked almost like reverence. Then, Serafina looked away and continued walking, but Marcus noticed her posture had become more rigid. "Do you know them?" Marcus asked quietly. "All paths cross eventually in the cosmos," Serafina replied, which wasn't really an answer at all. As the day progressed, Marcus's regular cleaning routine became an exercise in careful observation. He began to notice patterns in how different species reacted to Serafina. The more ancient and historically knowledgeable the race, the more intense their reactions seemed to be. Younger species and individuals showed little interest, but the elder members of several diplomatic delegations seemed to recognize something about her that left them visibly shaken. The most dramatic reaction came from a Draconian trade representative, a member of one of the few species that shared obvious physical similarities with Serafina. The moment he spotted her across the central plaza, he froze as if struck by lightning. His scales, normally a deep blue, shifted to patterns of silver and gold that Marcus had never seen before. "By the ancient fires," the Draconian breathed, his words carrying clearly across the plaza. "It cannot be." He started to move toward them, his expression a mixture of awe and terror, but Serafina quickly guided Marcus into a side corridor before the alien could reach them. "We should return to your quarters," she said, and there was an urgency in her voice that hadn't been there before. "What's going on?" Marcus asked as they hurried through the service passages. "Why does everyone seem to know you?" "I told you I was separated from my family during a conflict," Serafina said. What I did not mention was that the conflict in question was rather significant in galactic history. "How significant?" Serafina stopped walking and turned to face him, her golden eyes filled with something that might have been regret. "The Dragon Wars, Marcus. I was separated from my family during the Dragon Wars." Marcus felt his breath catch. Every schoolchild in the galaxy learned about the Dragon Wars, though the details were often vague. It had been a conflict of such magnitude that it had reshaped the political landscape of known space. The dragons have been one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, with technology and abilities that bordered on the magical. The war had ended over 2 centuries ago, with what most history books described as the Great Departure. The dragons had simply vanished from civilized space, retreating to unknown regions beyond the galactic rim. Some scholars believe they had gone into voluntary exile, while others theorized they had been destroyed or had ascended to some higher plane of existence. "You're over 200 years old?" Marcus asked, trying to process this information. "Considerably older, actually," Seraphina said with a sad smile. "We're a long-lived species. I was already ancient when the wars began. But that would make you—" Marcus's mind raced through the implications. If Seraphina was truly that old, and if she had been significant enough in dragon society to be remembered by other elder species, then she wasn't just any refugee. She was a living piece of galactic history. "It makes me very tired," Seraphina said gently, seeing his confusion. "And it makes me someone who prefers to avoid attention. Which is why we should return to your quarters before more of the station's inhabitants begin to remember old stories." As they made their way back through the service corridors, Marcus's mind whirled with questions. Who exactly had he rescued from those guards? What role had she played in the Dragon Wars? And why was she traveling alone, clearly in reduced circumstances, when she was obviously someone of significant historical importance? Back in his quarters, Marcus watched as Seraphina seemed to deflate slightly, as if maintaining her composure in public had required considerable effort. "You have questions," she observed. "A few hundred," Marcus admitted. "But I guess the main one is, why didn't you tell me who you are?" "Because who I was is less important than who I am now," Seraphina replied. "I am an old female, far from home, seeking her family. The titles and honors of the past do not change that basic truth, but they might change how others treat you. If people knew, I would never have a moment's peace," Seraphina said firmly. "There are those who would seek to use me for political gain, others who would want to settle old scores from the war, and still others who would cage me as a curiosity from a bygone age. I chose long ago to leave that life behind." Marcus sat down heavily, trying to process everything. "So, when you said you were looking for family—" "I'm searching for my son," Seraphina said quietly. "We were separated during the final battle of the war. I've spent the last 2 centuries following rumors and leads, hoping to find some trace of him." The pain in her voice was unmistakable, and Marcus felt his heart go out to her. Despite whatever she had been in the past, she was a mother who had lost her child. That was something he could understand and respect. "I'll help you," he said simply. Seraphina looked at him in surprise. "Marcus, you don't understand what you're offering. My search has taken me to dangerous places, among dangerous people. It is not a journey for someone with a normal life to abandon." "My life isn't that normal," Marcus pointed out. "I'm a janitor on a space station, scraping together credits to visit my sick mother. I'm not exactly living the dream here. Even so, besides," Marcus continued, "you helped make the best breakfast I've ever had in my life. That's got to count for something." Despite everything, Seraphina smiled at that. It was the first genuinely happy expression Marcus had seen from her, and it transformed her face completely. For just a moment, he caught a glimpse of what she must have been like in her youth, radiating confidence and joy. "Very well," she said, "but if we were to travel together, there are things you must know. My past will not stay buried forever, and there are those in the galaxy who would not hesitate to harm anyone associated with me." As if summoned by her words, there came a sharp knock at Marcus's door. Both of them froze, listening. The knock came again, more insistent this time, followed by a voice that made Marcus's blood run cold. "Station security. Open immediately for inspection." Marcus looked at Seraphina, who had gone very still. Her golden eyes held a mixture of resignation and something that looked almost like anticipation. "It seems," she said quietly, "that my past has found us sooner than expected." Marcus moved toward the door, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for the control panel. Seraphina caught his wrist gently, but firmly. "Wait," she whispered. "Something is not right. Station security does not conduct random inspections of service quarters, and they certainly do not demand immediate entry without stating cause." Before Marcus could respond, the door exploded inward. Not opened, not forced, but literally blown apart by some kind of energy weapon. Through the smoking remains stepped three figures that made Marcus's blood freeze. They weren't station security at all. They were Void Hunters, the galaxy's most feared mercenaries and assassins. Each stood nearly 8 feet tall, their bodies encased in advanced combat armor that seemed to absorb light itself. Their faces were hidden behind helmets that pulsed with targeting displays, and they carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. Seraphina of the Golden Flame, the lead hunter, spoke, his voice mechanically distorted by his helmet systems. By order of the Triumvirate Council, you are to be taken alive for questioning regarding war crimes committed during the Dragon conflicts. Marcus felt his world tilt. Vaklimis? Triumvirate Council? These were names from the darkest chapters of galactic history textbooks, organizations that supposedly no longer existed. Seraphina stepped forward, placing herself between Marcus and the hunters. As she moved, something extraordinary happened. The air around her began to shimmer with heat, and her dulled scales started to gleam with an inner fire that grew brighter with each passing second. The Triumvirate fell with the old empire, she said, her voice carrying a resonance that seemed to vibrate through Marcus's bones. You serve dead masters, Hunter. The Triumvirate endures, the hunter replied, and you have debts to pay. The lead hunter raised his weapon, but Seraphina was faster. Her transformation was immediate and shocking. The tired, elderly Dragoness Marcus had been helping vanished, replaced by something magnificent and terrible. Fire erupted from her throat in a controlled stream that struck the hunter's weapon, melting it instantly. Her scales now blazed with golden light, and her eyes had become twin suns. Marcus, get behind me and stay low, she commanded, her voice now carrying absolute authority. The other two hunters opened fire, but their energy bolt struck some kind of barrier that flared to life around Seraphina. The air shimmered and twisted as advanced technology met ancient draconic power. Impressive, the lead hunter said, discarding his ruined weapon and drawing what looked like a sword made of pure energy. But you are old, and we are many. More hunters poured through the destroyed doorway. Marcus counted at least 6, possibly more, in the corridor beyond. These weren't random mercenaries hired for a simple capture mission. This was a military operation. Seraphina spread her arms wide, and wings that Marcus hadn't even known she possessed unfurled from her back. They were magnificent, each feather scale edged with fire, spanning the entire width of his small quarters. She was no longer the humble refugee he had helped. She was a dragon queen in her full power, ancient and terrible and beautiful beyond description. You made a mistake coming here, she said, and her voice now carried harmonics that seemed to resonate through the station's hull itself. You brought violence into a place of peace. You threatened an innocent who showed me kindness. For this, you will burn. What followed was like watching a force of nature unleashed. Seraphina moved with impossible speed and grace, her fire precise and devastating. She didn't just fight the hunters, she dominated them. Her flames cut through their armor like paper. Her claws struck with surgical precision, and her movements were poetry written in combat. But Marcus could see the toll it was taking on her. Despite her awesome display of power, she was still ancient, still exhausted from whatever journey had brought her here. Each exchange left her slightly slower, each breath of fire slightly less intense. And more hunters kept coming. We need to get out of here, Marcus shouted over the sound of energy weapons and roaring flames. There is nowhere to run, Seraphina replied, incinerating another hunter's weapon. They will have surrounded the section. As if to prove her point, explosions began echoing through the station's corridors. Emergency alarms blared, and the lights flickered as backup power systems engaged. Whatever was happening, it was bigger than just his quarters. Attention, all station personnel. A voice crackled through the emergency communication system. We are experiencing a security breach in multiple sections. All civilians are to remain in their quarters until further notice. Marcus grabbed his emergency communication device and switched to the maintenance frequency. His fellow janitors and service workers often used it to coordinate during emergencies. "This is Marcus in Section 7G, he broadcast. "What's happening out there?" The response was immediate and terrifying. "Marcus, this is Chun in Central Operations. The station is under attack. Unknown forces have taken control of multiple sections. They're hunting someone, and they don't care who gets in their way." More explosions, closer this time. Through the gaping hole where his door had been, Marcus could see smoke and fire in the corridor. "How many are there?" Marcus asked. "At least 50 combat units that we've identified." Chin's voice crackled back. "Maybe more. Station security is completely overwhelmed. They're calling for backup from the fleet, but it'll be hours before help arrives." 50 hunters. Marcus looked at Seraphina, who was holding a defensive position near the destroyed entrance. She was powerful beyond anything he had imagined, but she couldn't fight an entire army, especially not in her current state. "There's something else," Chen continued. "The attackers aren't just hunting randomly. They've been scanning the station's databases, pulling up records. This is a targeted operation." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. They weren't just here for Seraphina. They had come prepared with intelligence and resources that suggested this operation had been planned for a long time. "Seraphina," he called, "we need to move. If they're accessing station records, they'll know the layout of every corridor, every service tunnel." "I cannot run forever," she replied, her flames flickering slightly as exhaustion began to show. "And I will not lead them to innocent civilians." "Then we don't run," Marcus said, surprising himself with the decision. "We fight, but we fight smart." He activated his cleaning cart's internal systems, accessing the maintenance network that connected every part of the station. As a janitor, he had clearance to areas that most people never saw, knowledge of systems that even station security often overlooked. "I know this place better than they do," he said. "Every air duct, every maintenance shaft, every emergency system. And there's something else they probably don't know about." Marcus brought up a schematic on his cart's display. "The station's core has emergency protocols that can seal off entire sections, create atmospheric barriers, even vent areas to space if necessary. But you need administrative access to use them." "Which we don't have," Seraphina pointed out. "No, but I know someone who might help us." Marcus switched his communicator to another frequency. "Dr. Yuki, this is Marcus from maintenance. Are you receiving?" Dr. Yuki Tanaka was the station's head of xenobiology, a brilliant human scientist who had always treated the service staff with respect and kindness. More importantly, she had administrative access to many of the station's systems. "Marcus," her voice came through clearly, though he could hear weapons fire in the background. "Thank goodness you're alive. Where are you?" "Section 7G, but we're about to move." "Dr. Tanaka, I need you to listen carefully. The attackers are here for my guest, but this goes way beyond what it seems. She's someone important from the Dragon Wars, and these aren't just mercenaries. This is a military operation." There was a pause before Dr. Tanaka responded. "Dragon Wars? Marcus, that's ancient history. Who exactly is your guest?" Marcus looked at Seraphina, who nodded grimly. "Tell her," the Dragoness said. "If we're to survive this, allies must know what they fight for." "Her name is Seraphina of the Golden Flame," Marcus said, "and I'm pretty sure she's royalty." Another pause, longer this time. When Dr. Tanaka spoke again, her voice was filled with awe and something that might have been fear. "Marcus, if you're telling the truth, then you're harboring one of the most significant historical figures in galactic history." Seraphina of the Golden Flame was the Dragon Empress, ruler of the greatest civilization the galaxy has ever known. Empress. The word hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had rescued the Empress of the Dragons. No wonder the hunters had come in such force. No wonder the station's elder aliens had reacted with such shock. "Dr. Tanaka," he said, his voice hoarse with realization. "Can you help us?" "I'm already on my way," she replied. "If the Dragon Empress has returned, then everything we thought we knew about galactic history might be about to change. And I'll be damned if I let a bunch of void hunters decide how that story ends. As if responding to their conversation, the sounds of battle in the corridor grew louder. More hunters were arriving, and their tactics were becoming more aggressive. They're bringing up heavy weapons, Seraphina observed, her enhanced senses picking up details Marcus couldn't detect. We have perhaps minutes before they can breach my defenses. Marcus looked around his small quarters, at the life he had built for himself on this station. It wasn't much, but it was honest and peaceful. That peace was ending, whether he wanted it to or not. He could try to hide, let Seraphina face her fate alone, and hope the hunters would leave the rest of the station in peace. Or he could stand with her. "Your Majesty," he said, using her title for the first time. Seraphina turned to look at him, surprise evident in her golden eyes. "I don't know much about galactic politics or ancient history," Marcus continued, "but I know right from wrong. And this is wrong. So what do you need me to do?" For a moment, the Empress of the Dragons simply stared at him. Then, slowly she smiled. "What I need, Marcus of humanity, is for you to show me these maintenance tunnels of yours. Because if the Triumvirate wants war, they have just awakened the one dragon in the galaxy who remembers how to give it to them." Marcus led Seraphina through the maintenance access behind his quarters, crawling through passages that he had cleaned and maintained for 3 years. Behind them, the sounds of the hunters breaching his room grew distant, but he knew it wouldn't take them long to figure out where they had gone. "The central hub is our best bet," he explained as they moved through the narrow tunnels. "Dr. Tanaka can access the station's defense systems from there, and there are multiple escape routes if things go bad." Seraphina moved behind him with surprising grace for someone of her size, her wings folded tightly against her back. Even in the cramped space, she radiated a presence that made the very air seem to vibrate with contained power. "Marcus," she said quietly as they paused at a junction, "there are things you must understand before we go further. My presence here will bring consequences that extend far beyond this station." "What kind of consequences?" "The Dragon Wars were not simply a conflict between species," Seraphina explained, her voice heavy with old grief. "They were a civil war among my people, a schism that tore apart the greatest civilization the galaxy had ever known. Some dragons believed we should guide and protect the younger species. Others believed we should rule them directly." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's environmental controls. "Which side were you on?" "I tried to find a middle path," she said. "I believed in cooperation, in teaching rather than ruling. But the extremists on both sides saw my position as weakness. When the war began in earnest, I found myself fighting enemies who had once been friends, protecting people who feared me even as I defended them." They reached a major maintenance hub, and Marcus checked his scanner for any signs of hunter activity. The coast seemed clear, but he knew that could change in an instant. "What happened to your son?" he asked as they prepared to move to the next section. Seraphina's expression grew distant. Aurelius was young when the final battle came, barely past his 2nd century, still learning to control his powers. He disagreed with my policies, believed I was too soft on those who would harm our people. When the Triumvirate made their final push, he joined them. Marcus stopped moving entirely. "He joined the enemy? He believed he was saving our people," Seraphina said, and the pain in her voice was unmistakable. "The Triumvirate convinced him that only through absolute rule could dragons maintain peace in the galaxy. They promised him that once they achieved victory, there would be no more war, no more suffering." "And you fought against him?" "I tried to bring him home," she whispered. "But the final battle was chaos. Our forces were scattered, communication was impossible, and, in the end," she trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Marcus began to understand the true magnitude of what Seraphina had endured. She hadn't just lost a war or her throne. She had lost her child to an ideology she opposed, had been forced to fight against her own son to protect the principles she believed in. "That's why you're searching for him," Marcus realized. "You think he might have survived." "I know he survived," Seraphina said firmly. "A mother knows these things. But I also know that 2 centuries of exile might have changed him. The sun I seek may no longer be the sun I remember. They reached another junction, and Marcus consulted his map. They were close to the central hub now, but the most direct route would take them through areas that were likely crawling with hunters. There's something else, Seraphina continued. The triumvirate that hunts me now is not the same organization that my son joined. The original triumvirate was destroyed along with most of the dragon civilization. What exists now is something darker, something that has twisted the ideals he fought for into something unrecognizable. Before Marcus could respond, his communicator crackled to life. Marcus, this is Dr. Tanaka. Where are you? About 50 meters from the central hub, he replied. But there's hunter activity between us and the main corridors. I've managed to activate some of the emergency protocols, she said. I can create a clear path for you, but you'll have to move fast. The hunters are adapting to the station's defenses faster than I expected. Through the maintenance tunnel's small observation port, Marcus could see hunter units methodically searching the main corridor. Their movements were precise, professional, and utterly ruthless. These weren't mercenaries looking for a quick payday. These are soldiers on a crusade. Dr. Tanaka, he said quietly, how much do you know about current galactic politics? Specifically about organizations that might want to restart the Dragon Wars. More than I'd like to, she replied grimly. The fall of the dragons left a power vacuum that various groups have been trying to fill for 2 centuries. Some want to prevent any dragon resurgence. Others want to control it for their own purposes. And the triumvirate, if they're truly back, then we're looking at something much worse than a simple hunting expedition. The original triumvirate believed in absolute rule through superior force. A modern version would have access to 2 centuries of technological advancement, plus whatever dragon artifacts and knowledge they've managed to preserve. Seraphina's expression darkened at this. They seek not just to capture me, but to use me as a symbol. Proof that the old ways can be restored under their leadership. Over my dead body, Marcus muttered, surprising himself with the vehemence of his response. Both Seraphina and Dr. Tanaka seemed taken aback by his tone. Marcus wasn't normally the type to make dramatic declarations, but something about this situation had awakened a fierce protectiveness in him. Dr. Tanaka, he continued, can you access the station's communication array? If these hunters are part of something bigger, then people need to know about it. I can try, she replied, but they've been jamming most long-range communications. What did you have in mind? Marcus looked at Seraphina, an idea forming in his mind. What if we didn't try to hide who she is? What if we announced it? Absolutely not, Seraphina said immediately. The chaos that would cause would work in our favor, Marcus continued. Think about it. Every major power in the galaxy thought the dragons were extinct. The sudden return of their empress would send shockwaves through every government, every military, every trading consortium. Dr. Tanaka's voice came through the communicator with growing excitement. He's right. If the galaxy knew that Seraphina of the Golden Flame was alive, it would trigger massive political and economic upheavals. Ships would be dispatched, alliances would shift, and suddenly a few dozen hunters wouldn't be the biggest threat on this station. It would also make me a target for every ambitious faction in the galaxy, Seraphina pointed out. You're already a target, Marcus said. But this way, you'd have protection too. There are species out there who remember the dragons fondly, who benefited from your rule. They want to ensure your safety. Seraphina was quiet for a long moment, considering. There is wisdom in your words, she admitted finally, and it would certainly complicate the hunter's mission. Then, it's decided, Dr. Tanaka said. I'll start preparing a broadcast. But first, you need to get to the central hub. I'm activating Emergency Protocol 7 now. You'll have about 90 seconds of clear corridor before the hunters adapt. Marcus heard the distinctive hum of the station's security systems engaging. Emergency barriers dropped into place throughout the section, cutting off hunter movement patterns and forcing them into bottlenecks where the station's automated defenses could engage them. Move now, Dr. Tanaka commanded. Marcus and Seraphina emerged from the maintenance tunnel into chaos. Emergency lights flashed red, alarms blared, and the sounds of combat echoed from multiple directions. But the main corridor to the central hub was clear, just as Dr. Tanaka had promised. They ran, Serafina keeping pace with Marcus despite her injuries and exhaustion. Behind them, Marcus could hear the distinctive whine of Hunter energy weapons cutting through emergency barriers. They had perhaps 30 seconds before pursuit resumed. The central hub was a massive spherical chamber at the heart of the station, filled with monitoring equipment and control systems. Dr. Tanaka was there waiting for them, her hands flying over multiple control panels as she tried to coordinate the station's defenses. "Your Majesty," she said formally as Serafina entered. "It's an honor." "The honor is mine," Serafina replied. "You risk much for a stranger." "Not a stranger," Dr. Tanaka corrected. "A legend. And if I can help write the next chapter of that legend, then my life will have meant something." She activated the main communication array, and suddenly, the hub filled with displays showing star charts, fleet positions, and diplomatic channels from across the galaxy. "Once this broadcast goes out, there's no taking it back," she warned. "Every major power will know within hours." Marcus looked at Serafina, seeing the weight of decision in her golden eyes. For 2 centuries, she had lived in anonymity, avoiding the responsibilities and dangers of her true identity. In the next few minutes, all of that would change forever. "Do it," Serafina said finally. "But first, there's something else the galaxy needs to know." She moved to the central communication console, her presence somehow making the advanced technology seem almost primitive by comparison. "When this broadcast begins," she said, "I want to send a message to my son as well. If Aurelius still lives, if he's taken a new name and built a new life, then he needs to know that his mother never stopped looking for him, and that regardless of what he's become, I still love him." Dr. Tanaka's hands paused over the controls. "Your Majesty, if your son is connected to the modern triumvirate, then he needs to hear this most of all," Serafina said firmly. "The time for hiding is over. The galaxy will know that the dragons have returned, and they will know that we do not seek conquest. We seek family." As she spoke, Marcus felt something shift in the air around them. Serafina's power was growing, fed by determination and maternal love. She was no longer the exhausted refugee he had helped. She was becoming something magnificent and terrible, a force of nature preparing to reclaim her place in galactic history. "Begin the broadcast," she commanded, and her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate through the station's very bones. Dr. Tanaka's fingers flew over the controls, and suddenly, every communication channel in the galaxy was carrying the same message. On screens throughout civilized space, beings who had never seen a dragon watched in awe as Serafina of the Golden Flame announced her return to a galaxy that had thought her species extinct. But Marcus wasn't watching the screens. He was watching the tactical displays, where new contacts were appearing at the edge of the system. Ships were coming, drawn by the broadcast like moths to a flame. The real battle was about to begin. The broadcast had been active for only 12 minutes when the first ship appeared. It materialized at the edge of the system without warning, a massive vessel that seemed to absorb starlight itself. Marcus had never seen anything like it, but Dr. Tanaka's face went pale as her sensors identified it. "That's a Sovereign-class dreadnought," she whispered. "Only one organization in the galaxy has access to those. The Imperial Navy," Serafina said quietly, her golden eyes fixed on the tactical display. "But that's impossible." The Empire fell with the dragons. More ships began appearing, forming a perfect battle formation around the mysterious dreadnought. Their configuration was unlike anything in the modern galactic navies, speaking of technologies and tactical doctrines that predated current civilization by centuries. Serafina, Dr. Tanaka, said urgently, "I'm receiving a transmission from the lead ship. It's using Imperial Dragon protocols that haven't been active for over 200 years." Marcus watched as Serafina straightened, her entire bearing shifting. The exhausted refugee was gone entirely now, replaced by an empress preparing to face her destiny. "Put it through," she commanded. The central hub's main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the dreadnought. But what Marcus saw there defied all his expectations. Standing at the center of the command deck was another dragon, younger than Seraphina, but unmistakably related to her. His scales were deep gold with traces of silver, and his eyes held the same regal bearing that Marcus had come to associate with true nobility. When he spoke, his voice carried across space with absolute authority. "Mother." Seraphina's composure cracked for just a moment, her hand reaching toward the screen as if she could touch the sun she had lost centuries ago. "Aurelius," she breathed. "My son, I receive your broadcast," he continued, his tone formal despite the obvious emotion beneath it, as did others who remember the old ways. "The question now is whether you truly seek family, or whether this is some elaborate trap." Marcus felt confusion wash over him. If this was Seraphina's son, why wasn't this a happy reunion? Why did he seem suspicious of her motives? "Aurelius," Seraphina said, her voice carrying all the love and pain of a mother's 2-century search, "I have never stopped looking for you. I have never stopped hoping that we could find a way to heal the wounds between us." The wounds between us. Aurelius's expression hardened. "Mother, you chose the weak path. You chose to bow to inferior species rather than guide them properly. Your policies led directly to the chaos that consumed our civilization." Marcus began to understand. The son Seraphina had been searching for wasn't just alive, he was the leader of the modern triumvirate. The organization hunting her was under the command of her own child. "I chose the path of cooperation," Seraphina replied firmly. "I chose to build rather than conquer, to teach rather than rule through fear." "And where did that choice lead?" Aurelius demanded. "Our people scattered to the winds, our knowledge lost, our civilization reduced to legends and half-remembered stories. For 2 centuries, the galaxy has suffered without proper guidance, descending into the petty conflicts and economic chaos that plague it today." Dr. Tanaka leaned toward Marcus and whispered, "The tactical display shows at least 50 hunter ships emerging from hyperspace. Whatever this is, it's not just a family reunion." Marcus looked at the screens showing the approaching vessels. They were surrounding the station, but they weren't attacking. This felt more like a siege than an assault. "Aurelius," Seraphina continued, "the modern triumvirate is not what you originally fought for. What exists now has become twisted by power and isolation. The dragons who follow you rule through fear, not wisdom. We rule because someone must," Aurelius replied coldly. "The younger species have proven incapable of governing themselves. They fight constant wars, pollute their worlds, and squander resources on meaningless conflicts. Under our guidance, there is peace." "Under your dominion, you mean," Seraphina said. "My son, this is not the way. This has never been the way." As the argument continued, Marcus noticed something on the long-range sensors. More ships were approaching, but these weren't part of Aurelius's fleet. They were coming from multiple directions, different configurations, different technologies. "Dr. Tanaka," he said quietly, "who else did you send that broadcast to?" "Everyone," she replied grimly. "Every major government, every trading consortium, every military command in known space. If the Dragon Empress has returned, everyone wants to be here for what happens next." The tactical display was becoming crowded with new contacts. Marcus recognized some of the ship types from his years on the station. Kithran battlecruisers, Zolonian diplomatic vessels, even some human ships from the Earth colonial fleet. "This is getting complicated," Marcus observed. "Complicated?" Dr. Tanaka laughed bitterly. "Marcus, we're about to witness the most significant political event in galactic history. Every faction that has a stake in galactic governance is converging on this position." On the screen, Aurelius had paused in his argument with Seraphina to consult with his own tactical officers. When he returned his attention to the communication, his expression was grimmer. "It seems your broadcast has attracted unwanted attention, Mother. The lesser species seek to interfere in family business." "They are not lesser," Seraphina said firmly. "They're different. And their differences are what make the galaxy strong. Their differences make them weak and chaotic, Aurelius countered. But no matter, I came here to offer you one final chance to see reason. Join with me. Help me restore proper order to the galaxy. Together, we can rebuild the Dragon Empire greater than it ever was. Marcus felt his breath catch. This was the moment everything had been building toward. Seraphina's response would determine not just her fate, but potentially the future of galactic civilization. And if I refuse? Seraphina asked. Then you will be detained for the safety of the galaxy, Aurelius replied, his voice heavy with regret. I take no pleasure in this, Mother, but I cannot allow your misguided ideals to threaten the peace we have worked so hard to establish. Seraphina was quiet for a long moment, looking at her son's image on the screen. Marcus could see the pain in her expression, the agonizing choice between maternal love and moral principle. Finally, she spoke. Aurelius, my beloved son, I have searched for you for 2 centuries. I have crossed the galaxy, faced dangers beyond counting, all for the hope of seeing you again. But I will not support what you have become. The dragons were meant to be guardians and teachers, not conquerors and tyrants. Aurelius closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them again, they held a sadness that made Marcus's heart ache for both mother and son. So be it, he said quietly. All vessels, begin boarding procedures. The station is to be secured and all personnel taken into protective custody. Before anyone could respond, a new voice cut through the communication channel with absolute authority. Belay that order immediately. The voice belonged to a human, speaking with the crisp accent of Earth's diplomatic corps. On the secondary screens, Marcus could see the source. Admiral Sarah Chun of the Earth Colonial Fleet, broadcasting from the bridge of humanity's newest dreadnought. This is Admiral Chun of the Earth Colonial Fleet, she continued. By order of the Galactic Council, and under the protection of the Sapient Rights Charter, this station is now under multinational protection. Any attempt to board without proper authorization will be considered an act of war. Aurelius's expression shifted to one of amused contempt. Admiral, you command a handful of primitive vessels against the might of the Imperial Dragon Navy. Stand down before you condemn your people to unnecessary destruction. Emperor Aurelius, Admiral Chen replied formally, and Marcus realized that she was acknowledging his title while simultaneously defying his authority. I command 18 dreadnoughts, 47 cruisers, and supporting vessels from 6 different species. Your Imperium is outnumbered 3-1. Marcus looked at the tactical display with new eyes. The scattered ships he had dismissed as random arrivals were actually a coordinated fleet, taking defensive positions around the station. Humanity's allies had responded to the broadcast with military precision. This is madness, Aurelius said, his composure finally cracking. You would risk interstellar war to protect someone who poses a threat to galactic stability? We would risk war to protect someone who represents hope for galactic cooperation, Admiral Chen replied. Seraphina of the Golden Flame is under the protection of the Allied Defense Pact. Any aggression against her will be met with overwhelming force. Dr. Tanaka turned to Marcus with amazement. Do you realize what just happened? Humanity just declared itself the protector of the Dragon Empress. We've gone from galactic janitors to major players overnight. But Marcus was watching Seraphina's face as she observed the standoff developing around her. The weight of decision was visible in her expression, the knowledge that her choices would determine whether peace prevailed or whether the galaxy would tear itself apart in a new dragon war. Aurelius, she said finally, her voice carrying across the communication channels to both fleets, you speak of peace and order, but look around you. Your very presence here has brought nothing but the threat of violence. Is this the peace you offer the galaxy? Mother, these lesser species threaten everything we've built. They must be brought to heel before they destroy themselves and everything around them. My son, Seraphina replied sadly, you have become exactly what I hoped to prevent. You see enemies where there are only differences threats where there are only opportunities for growth. She turned away from the screen, facing Marcus directly. Marcus of humanity, you have shown me more genuine kindness and respect in our brief acquaintance than my own son offers entire civilizations. This tells me everything I need to know about who deserves to inherit the future. Turning back to the communication array, she addressed both fleets with the full authority of her ancient title. I am Seraphina of the Golden Flame, Empress of the Dragon Realms, Guardian of the Seven Spirals, and Mother to the being who now calls himself Emperor. By the ancient laws that still bind our people, I formally challenge the legitimacy of the Triumvirate and call for the restoration of cooperative governance. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Across Aurelius's fleet, Marcus could see ships beginning to break formation. Not all of them, but enough to suggest that the Dragon Empress still commanded loyalty among some of her people. Furthermore, Seraphina continued, her voice now carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate through space itself, I place myself under the protection of the species that have proven themselves worthy of trust and cooperation. The age of Dragon Dominion is over. The age of galactic partnership begins now. Aurelius stared at his mother through the communication link, his expression a mixture of love, betrayal, and desperate determination. Mother, please reconsider. Without proper guidance, the galaxy will tear itself apart. My son, Seraphina replied gently, I have reconsidered every day for 2 centuries. Today, I choose hope over fear, growth over control, love over dominion. The question now is what you will choose. The silence that followed seemed to stretch across the entire system. 2 fleets faced each other in the darkness between stars, while the fate of galactic civilization hung in the balance. Marcus found himself holding his breath, waiting to see whether the galaxy would step forward into a new age of cooperation or backward into an age of conquest. Finally, Aurelius spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. All ships, withdraw to safe distance. We will discuss this further at another time. As the Imperial fleet began to pull back, Admiral Chen's voice came through the communication array once more. Your Majesty, the Allied fleet would be honored to provide escort to any destination you choose. The galaxy owes you a debt that can never be fully repaid. Seraphina smiled then, the first truly peaceful expression Marcus had seen from her since their first meeting. Admiral Chun, I accept your offer with gratitude. But first, there is someone here who deserves recognition for his courage and kindness. She turned to Marcus, who suddenly found himself the center of attention from fleets spanning multiple star systems. Marcus of humanity, you helped a stranger without thought of reward or consequence. You stood with me when others would have turned away. You have proven that the greatest strength in the galaxy is not the power to dominate, but the courage to do what is right. Marcus felt his cheeks burning as he realized that his acts of simple human kindness were being broadcast across the galaxy as examples of heroism. Your Majesty, he managed to say, I just did what anyone should have done. Exactly, Seraphina replied with a smile that seemed to light up the entire central hub. And that, Marcus of humanity, is why your species will help lead the galaxy into its next golden age. As the various fleets established peaceful formations around the station and diplomatic channels opened between dozens of species, Marcus reflected on the strange turns his life had taken. 3 days ago, he had been a simple janitor saving credits to visit his sick mother. Now he was apparently a galactic hero, standing beside the Dragon Empress as she reshaped the political landscape of known space. But as he looked around the central hub, seeing humans working alongside aliens as equals, seeing former enemies choosing cooperation over conflict, Marcus realized that maybe this was exactly where he was supposed to be. Sometimes the most important changes came not from grand gestures or military might, but from simple acts of kindness between strangers. And sometimes, helping an old lady with her luggage could change the course of galactic history.